I guess the Pat Stedman Periscope. Maybe that's what we're gonna be calling it these days. And yeah, just letting you guys know, I tweeted out today. We're gonna be getting a lot of clips up from working with Tiger on that. We're gonna get a lot of clips up of past Periscopes. So we're gonna have some fun promo stuff going on Twitter, and also going to start to do things on YouTube. Um, I'm not sure at this point what I might be doing. I think I'm going to probably continue to do just the Periscopes, but I'm going to have them uploaded afterwards to YouTube to try to pull in larger audience base. Um, also getting all the the COVID Cabal ones stored away on a hard drive, just so have those ones for a little bit of posterity's sake. We're going to actually talk a little bit about that tonight too. We got a lot of things we're going to be covering on today's Periscope, but as always, we got to do the wine. Um, almost, almost done with Tuscany. God, we're just like, Italy's a grind, isn't it? I'm tempted to save Piemonte just and jump elsewhere. You know me, ENTP, whatever, get a little bored of doing the same sort of area, even though they are, of course, all different. But let's go into it. Let's check out these ones. So we started off Tuscany with the only really high end white there. High end, I say with quotation marks, and that's the Vernacci the San Gimignano. And we're gonna finish, except for Sassiaca and all the really, there's some really good reds that we haven't done that are the super Tuscans. But pretty much we're gonna finish Tuscany with some of the basic whites, which you get around the coast, called Maremma. All right, so remember Maremma. This is Maremma right here. Okay, it actually goes all the way down. If I'm aware, I think it goes even a little bit into Lazio, right? But this is Maremma. Okay, this is Maremma. Not really too special. Not a special place except for the Super Tuscans, right? Not so special. So what we're going to try today is we have two Vermentinos. I think we did this brand before with one of the reds, but one's organic grapes, one is not. Love how they call it Forte right there. They like to pop it up. And then we have just a basic Maremma Toscana. This is mostly Trebbiano, but it has some Vermentino and even a little Sauvignon Blanc. So last thing before we taste, I want to just note something here. The organic Vermentino is pretty lemon lime colored, and so is just the regular Maremma Toscana. But the center Vermentino, the one they said Forte, right, is much more yellow. So I wonder if they've done a higher extraction on this, but they don't give any indication. So let's try this. That's actually really nice. Vermentino is very aromatic, and I personally find aromatic whites to get annoying. I'm not saying I don't like them, but I can find them annoying. And you are getting a little bit of that in the tail end. But on the front end, this is really refreshing. It's just super simple, super refreshing. It's got a nice little sourness to it, which I like. It's like a green apple kind of crispiness. Let's try number two. Ooh, it's actually really nice nose. So here's what they did. I think they added some oak treatment to the main Vermentino here. That's why they call it the Forte, probably. And that oak treatment already on the nose, I mean, this wine has really jumped ahead. I'm quite surprised and impressed by that. Malolactic fermentation. So, little quick lesson here. I don't actually know how much of it is oak treatment, because malolactic and oak you can sometimes get confused with because they tend to be put together. But basically, malic acid is one of the acids, probably the primary acid you get in white wine, right? Malic acid is the same kind of acid you would have in many fruits, right? Like apples, pears. It's super common, okay? And which is one of the reasons why you get some of the similar profile. Now, you also get citric acid in wine. You get all bunch of acids, but malic acid in white wine is the primary one. There's a process in winemaking you can go through where you actually convert the malic acid into lactic acid, right? Lactic acid, which is in milk, okay? So they call it malolactic fermentation. But what you get from that process is you get a real smoothing out, because malic acid, right, if you bite into an apple, it's crisp, right? It's maybe acidic. Whereas lactic acid, it's like creamy. It's almost like buttery. And so it's a way to smooth out the palate of a white wine. Now you see this, and it was overdone with a lot of California Chardonnays, where they would add that also with a lot of oak treatment. So you'd have a lot of vanilla, like buttered popcorn. And personally, I think it's mostly out of favor at this point. White Rioja does it too. I don't mind it in White Rioja because it's classic. I don't mind, but they really overdid it. Like every single white in California was just filled with, oakiness and malolactic, and that was pretty crappy. But if it's done right, it's amazing. And this is a great example of it. I'm actually like super impressed because this wine was not very expensive, and this is really well made. I mean, this is kind of a generic brand, and it's really well made. I'll show you guys this again. Highly recommend that. Highly, highly recommend that. All right, let's try the last one. Trebbiano is always a little bit of a disappointment. Super quaffable. It's Trebbiano, nothing special. So simple compared to number 2. All right, guys, so let's talk about a couple things. First thing, I just want to get, we're not talking politics or anything on here, right? We're taking a break on that stuff for obvious reasons. But I did want to just, ask you guys how you were feeling about the lull, because this is a lull. It's a lull. It's February. It's a lull. And I will just note a couple things. I think one of the big ones, and I don't hold any weight on this. I'm just to give you guys an idea that there are still things that are moving. There's still pieces moving in the background, right? And one of the big pieces that's moving in the background is that tomorrow the Supreme Court is going to be reviewing. I think there's 3 cases that are going to the Supreme Court related to election fraud. Now, again, I'm not holding out any specific hope on this. But I just want to make a point that there are things moving on in the background. And I think a lot of you guys, I don't have to talk about it here. You guys are all able to do your own research and see things. And you can see that there's stuff happening, right? Myanmar, right? Very interesting, the dynamics of what happened in Myanmar. So we're going to see how it plays out. But I can tell you this, is that everything that, you guys remember, I was talking last May, June, I was saying I was kind of feeling that this was going to go on until next spring. And, again, did not expect all the little twists and turns along the way. But the energy always was like, we're going to start to see the resolution. We're going to start to see the resolution in spring. And everybody's saying the same stuff, guys. Everybody's saying March, April. March, April. So, it's the 11th month. It's the 11th hour, right? February is the 11th month, 11th hour in terms of an Earth system. It's the 11th month. So, 10th, 11th. So we're just gonna keep going forward and keep getting through it. I think we can all agree that things are getting pretty absurd. Things are getting pretty absurd, right? Levels of overt kind of corruption that, with the Secretary of Defense and Raytheon, right? I mean, just things that would be kind of obscene. But I think that, we all feel, all of us here, yeah, right? We all here feel the energy, though. We feel it moving. So it's the lull. It's the lull. I'll also make a, yeah, I don't know when, but I feel like the epicenter of it is going to be the equinox. And so I sort of have this band of 3 weeks around it on both directions where I feel like we're going to start to have some stuff occur. But maybe it takes longer. The reality is that these things happen as fast as the consciousness of the public supports it, right? Is my connection good? I just got a connection warning sign. How's the connection? Can you guys still get me here? Still good with the connection? All right, cool. They're just trolling me. They're just trolling me here. We are gonna see. I really feel like, if we stay the course, it's more likely to happen. But if we if we start to waver and if we start to feel and look, all I'm advocating here at all is that everybody stay completely positive about the situation and really detach from it. I think that's the real lesson. The real lesson is to just say, I'm not going to participate. I refuse to participate in it anymore. And when we refuse to participate in it, they lose more and more energy. They lose more and more buy-in. I when people bring up political things to me, I'm bored of it. I'm really bored of it, to be honest. It's not even like, oh, I can't really talk about it, or I'm really bored of it, to be honest. It's very, very boring at this point. Um, it feels like if you were in a relationship with somebody and they keep trying to provoke you with the same pattern, but you've had the same fight over and over and over again, and you're just done with it. You're just like, I don't want to fight with you anymore. I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't love you. I don't feel a connection to you. And so you keep trying to prod me, but I'm past this trigger point. And that's how it feels on a macro level. And there's still people who are working through that though. And that's what we're seeing. But I mean, I don't understand how people, frankly, can continue to be outraged about things. How can you still be outraged? You know, they ask you what's going on, you tell them, and they're like, but they're doing this stuff. Yeah, I know they're doing this stuff. Yeah, we know. We know. What do you expect, right? What do you expect? Anyway, so we're in the lull. I just wanted to check in. We've only had one kind of talk like this since the changing of the guard, so to speak. Um, to the extent that that's true, right? And I just wanted to keep an update with it. We'll check in again in another 2 weeks and just sort of see if anything continues to shift. But the main topic I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight before we go into the Q&A is I wanted to talk about addiction, and I wanted to talk about the masculine spirit, because there's been a couple of things that I have. Yeah, that's exactly right. The couple that has split up but still living out the lease in the apartment. Although I will say this, Alan, that everybody's pretty much everybody's done with it. I mean, there are, okay, obviously they're not everybody, but there's a huge number of people who are done with it. They just don't know what else is out there. They don't see an alternative. And Solbra had a really great tweet the other day, which really resonated with me. And he was talking about this whole thing, like nostalgic for a place that you haven't been to, but you're going to create. I love that. That was so amazing. That was so amazing because that was exactly how I feel. It's like I see, I talk to you guys a lot about the thin red line, but there's that famous exchange between um, Caviezel and, I don't know, I guess it's Sean Penn, Jim Caviezel, is that right? Jim Caviezel and Sean Penn. Hey, he says, I've seen a different world. Sometimes I think it's just my imagination. And it's this sort of sense like, you just don't really feel a part of it. You don't feel a part of it anymore. And you can visualize how things can be different. And it's not even just like you visualize it mentally, you feel it. And that's a point that people don't quite understand about visualization. Yeah, yeah. Well, I haven't dropped into the South Jersey accent yet. I can do that. Can do that. As I drink more, I'll probably start doing it more and more. Honestly, the South Jersey accent for me, if when I listen to the South Jersey accent, it's like I feel so relaxed. I feel like I'm at home. I feel like my grandma is like holding me to her bosom. I love it. I love it. Especially when I've been away from home. If I hear someone with it, it's just like, so I actually wish I had a more prominent accent. I think accents are cool. I think accents are identifiers of home, and to the extent that we start to lose them, I think it sucks, right? To have a generalized accent. Yeah, well, maybe Foth. I mean, Canada as well, pretty Anglo background. Well, your Anglo background. Dr. Dynamis talked about this other day. They have asked the question about whether or not, what do we get from past life perspective? Do we feel a call to a certain area because of a past life, or do we feel it because of DNA? And I don't think that it's either or, because by every single bit of research that I've done and sort of my own intuition, we mostly reincarnate in the same grouping. I'm not saying that we haven't reincarnated elsewhere, but we mostly reincarnate in the same family grouping, broader family grouping. It mostly happens. And so, I mean, but Ben, I think that you are British, so you could be just simply channeling with your ancestors. I mean, I certainly feel better in Northern Europe. I feel very comfortable in Northern Europe. Um, Even though in some ways aesthetically I'm more med, I feel more like natural habitat in Northern Europe. So, especially in the British Isles, which my genetic ancestry is from. Pretty sure you're an alcoholic Irishman in a past life. Well, alcoholic Irishman then, alcoholic New Yorker now. We've all. Hey, cheers to you, Bob. Cheers to you. Some things get passed on, right? That's a good segue. That's a good segue to talking about this addiction and stuff, and for guys, because I have to be honest. To pull off of okay, we're in this lull. Well, let's also talk about the lull from a spiritual perspective, because like I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. I know the manosphere freaks out about all these things, but after I got a new computer and I had done a bunch of I'd already done a bunch of crap. I got all the primary things I had to get the master class finished. I took 3 days and I played Hearts of Iron 4, played a video game, and it was fine. I didn't feel good about it. You don't feel good doing these things. You don't feel good afterwards. It's like an escape route. Now, the reason I did it though, and I've done this before, and I've talked about this before. I talked about it at length at Jack Donovan's podcast. I even mentioned it in private groups at the 21 convention. That you know, uh, Thomas Bevan mentioned, right? Thomas Bevan mentioned how you need to either learn something by God, what did he say exactly? He said it so well. It was like you need to learn it either by just being disciplined with it, or you need to allow yourself to hit a rock bottom point, and then you come out and you gather it. And he's totally right that the way to do it, the best way to do it, is just simply to do this sort of incremental progress. But the reality is that that's not. I wish that's how I operated. It's not how I operate. What I do is, in order for me to get to another level, I always have to go down to the bottom. I always have to do it, and I know that about myself. And I'll usually set aside, at this point, I set aside controlled demolitions, as I call them, where I allow myself to go down to a certain point so I can really understand my state at that point and maybe work through a pattern with it. But I was kind of asking myself afterwards, and I want this to be interpreted in context. I don't want people to come out of this thinking, any sort of demoralization stuff. But I sort of went through it, and then I got out of it. And I finished, the game, right? My playthrough, and I I was sort of like, and I was back in the regular world, and I was almost like, what is the fucking point of all this stuff? What is the point of it? I had that same feeling, by the way, after I was in the woods for a week, and there's a sort of sense. It's like, why shouldn't I just like, why should I just fuck around? Why am I even trying to do anything? Why don't I just get drunk, disappear? I mean, I have a daughter, right? I'm just giving you guys, and this is not my fundamental feeling of life, but I want, I, this stuff was coming up. There was this sort of apathy. There was an apathy. It's like, I could build a big business. I could help all these people. And what's the point? What is the point of doing it? What's the point of making more money? What's the point? And I was in there was this sort of sense of malaise. And it was very interesting because, I've been thinking a lot, like, what an incredible growth year. Like, March 9th to me is a very significant date because March 9th is when I left New York City to go to my parents. Now, of course, I've been back to New York multiple times. I'm going back to New York on Saturday. And I was thinking, like, back, wow, like March, April, like, how much was I learning? March, April, May. Like that whole first spring, March, April, May, June, I was watching like Stargate all the time, like trying to figure out, trying to learn, sharing all this interesting things. spring was like a beginning. It was like a beginning of this transition, like what's going on. And then summer, we were just kind of playing. And then after summer, it was like fall. And then you started to see the heaviness. And now we're in winter and it's just this fucking, it's this lull. And it's a spiritual lull too. It's almost like can't go backwards, but we can't go forward. Can't go backwards, but we can't go forward. So where are we? Well, we're in limbo. And I feel like that's a pattern with like with addiction stuff, especially that men face. And I'd gotten this, I don't think it's just me because I on a lot of calls with clients, they were coming at me with the same stuff. And I feel this so strongly that the reason men are doing this stuff today, they're doing it because we're fucking bored. We don't have a playground to create. And of course, you have people like Bronze Age Pervert who've been talking about this, right? This book, to a certain extent, is really about the lack of adventure, the sterility of the modern world. And there is a sort of thing that oppresses the male spirit. It really oppresses it. Like I I was in the woods for a week and I didn't eat. And I hiked every day with a pack on. And I was cold as fuck, right? But you know what? I was exhilarated. It was awesome. I felt great. I looked forward to the food, looked forward to the soup, etc. when I was getting home. But I felt great. And food wasn't really that big of a deal to me. But try fasting. If you try fasting when you have nothing else to do, I mean, yeah, I mean you can do it. You can be disciplined. You can do it. But it's boring. It sucks. I've fasted plenty of times. I've done 3-day fasts multiple times prior to this long fast. It was a lot harder on those fasts because you're just doing it like it's a mental exertion, like a will. But when you're out there in the wild, when even though it's still controlled, it's trail marked, right? But you're thinking like, is there going to be a bear out there? What's going to happen? No one's around here. Have your knife next to you. You kind of have these things that go through your head, and the male spirit, it really amps it up. It really amps it up, and that's what we want as men. We need a frontier. We need an adventure to go on. And without that, what do we do? What do we do? I'm really bored of self improvement, and some people are like, well, men are always about self improvement. If you're a real leader, fuck off. Honestly, fuck off. Come on, I've been doing self improvement for 12 years. Okay, and I still do it. It's not a matter of like, oh, I want to be. You just don't want to care about anything. You don't want to do about anything. You just got to become the best man. Yeah, I get that stuff. I like learning. I'm reading about the Spanish Civil War right now. I have a whole book, Hugh Thomas. It's very good. I'm learning Polish. Okay, I'm going to the gym. Blah blah blah. But seriously, guys, let's be honest with ourselves. As men, we are looking for something different. We are looking for something bigger, especially if you're young. If you got the fire in you, your soul wants something bigger. We need that we need it. We fucking need it. We need something to embark on. And it's like there's this big prison that we're in. And as long as that happens, it's like, I've seen people who've gone through 12-step programs and I give them so much credit. But there's always this malaise of people who it's like they give up their addiction and they pick up a lesser one, maybe. But there's always this sort of sense like, why am I here? Why am I still going through this? It's like, okay, yeah, I understand I can't do that anymore. But what feels good? Well, what feels good as a man is being on your edge. But there's a real edge where your life's at risk, and there's a fake edge when it's not. And we're at the point now where I think that if you do not have well, Sean, this is you bring up a really good point, and I've talked about this in private with people, but I mean, let's look a little bit at history here. Okay, wars are mostly done to hijack this energy from men, right? So if they don't want a war, if they don't see a practical use for a war, then they'll try to let it out in, through drugs and stuff. Like for instance, fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing men, yeah, but fentanyl is not the cause. Fentanyl is what is just getting the job done. But guys are looking for things to numb themselves from the dullness of their existence, especially if you're from a small town that has an economy dilapidated. You can't even, it's really tough to even try to pretend that you have some sort of reason to exist, right? Sports, yeah, it's another thing. People use sports. There's all these sort of things. The Romans called it panem et circenses, right? Bread and circuses. Keep them fed, keep them amused. But we're burning out of that, guys. We're burning out of it. You can do that for a time, but over a period, it's kind of like if you were to show something fake to somebody, you could get them to eat it for a little bit, but eventually the energetic of it doesn't feel proper to you, and you begin to lose your taste for it. We lose our taste for fake things. The main way I've seen that guys break their porn addiction is not because they have some incredible amount of willpower and they just decide to go cold turkey one day. What I've seen is that guys get out of their porn addiction because porn's boring and fake. It's boring and fake. And they get tired of watching more and more disgusting things. It doesn't start to give them a positive feeling anymore. It's not that I just man up. No, you watch so much filthy shit that you're like, I can't even tolerate this anymore. That's what happened. And it's the same thing that's going on this macro level. Now, they would do these hijackings, and you saw that, with the first, with after 9/11, right? And every generation, they'll usually do every generation or so, they'll do some little conflict to direct people. But you notice that the period of history where we didn't have any big wars in the modern era, between the Napoleonic Wars and between World War One, about 100-year period, there were no big wars. There were some skirmishes. We had the Crimean War. Of course, you had a bunch of colonial battles. You had the Boer War. Franco-Prussian War. But these were all very small, very brief. They were nothing like the Napoleonic Wars, and they were nothing like World War One. And the reason for that is because America had its frontier, and Europe had its empire. And so all of the men went off to all the masculine energy was directed into conquest, basically, of the rest of the world, or conquest of the interior, the taming of the interior. That's where it went. That's where it went. And you notice that World War One was in many senses a product of, I mean, I know how it was hijacked and how it was instigated, but the energies that were hijacked, right? The energies, there always has to be an energy to be hijacked. And a lot of it had to do with Germany not having an empire because it was a latecomer as a creation, but it was then a dominant power in Europe. So you're a dominant power in Europe, but you don't really have much of an empire. Versus other countries in Europe that are smaller and less, but they have a much bigger empire. So there's like a fairness aspect, and there were some grievances there, right? You had the, was it Agadir? It was in like 1908, but France and Germany almost went into war then over a skirmish in Morocco. So when they and you notice at that point, I mean, what was left? What was left was, well, the Arctic, and that was Arctic and Antarctic, and that was already begun, and that was pretty much ticked off by the 40s. So anyway, what's the point of all this stuff? Why am I mentioning all this stuff? What's the element? Is that I do hope that in this new era that we're going to have some big outlet, because this masculine energy is ready to, I mean, it's going to explode or it's going to implode. I mean, there's just no other way around it. Why are men like this? Well, because men aren't really satisfied with talking about men who have a real spirit, a real masculine soul, okay? Who have that really strong energy. They are just not satisfied. They're not satisfied with, okay, let me start this other side biz. I'm not denigrating that stuff. I think it's great people are doing it. That's a very productive outlet. I'm just saying that the soul of man is demanding something bigger. It's demanding a bigger vision. It's demanding a bigger purpose, because that is what men do. We want to be out on the unknown because that's when we feel alive. Feel fucking alive on the unknown. Yeah, hunting is great. I mean, these are great things, and nature is always a really good teacher for us. But I feel like even bigger than that. I mean, because there is something so incredible about going to a completely different place, going to a completely different place, going to the edge of knowledge, the edge of awareness. We've been doing a lot of internal work, masculine side, but yeah, I mean, unless you're going out into the interior of Alaska, I don't think you're really getting out on your edge because okay, you're going out hunting some deer, and there's definitely a channeling of your masculine with that. There's no doubt about it. But where's the big game that's going to kill you? I mean, you're looking for your prey. That's cool, but where's the big game that's going to kill you? I think we have to respect that about men. You know, this energy that exists, and a real man. I mean, I think a real man, you know, a real man. But I mean, a guy's, you know, if you have a really strong masculine spirit, you're going to want to keep doing that forever. I mean, when I hear people talk about, you know, well, self improvement, every leader has self improvement. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt would laugh his fucking ass off at thinking that that's sufficient. Like the bar is so low now. It's like, well, you know, you're not a leader unless you're doing self improvement. It's like, come on. Self improvement is not even thought about for these men. It's just a natural part of being. But they are doing self improvement for a tangible purpose. It's not vanity. I know what it's like to do self improvement for vanity. Yeah, you get fuck a lot more girls if I could do this, if I could do this, if I could do this. It's not how it. You do these things because it makes you because then they're things that expand your experience of life, and you can utilize them. But all the best things that we learn on their edge. That's what it's like being a man. So with that, I'm going to look at some of these questions that you guys had for me a while ago. So I would enjoy any comment on stabilizing healthy polarity, especially in marriage. Lots of extremes out there, so it's hard to filter everything. Or evaluating your current degree of polarity for the same reasons. Okay, so healthy polarity. What's a healthy polarity? Well, the first point of this is that if you are going to have a healthy polarity, okay, um, I think we have to be honest about individuals. One thing that I understand for beginners and even intermediate people, it's best not to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it from an advanced level because I'm not here to teach basics about, oh, you got to be masculine. You got to, you know, I'm not, let other people do that for those who need to get initially initiated. Okay. I'm here to help guys really get to their spiritual edge of masculinity and themselves. That's what I do. Okay. And the point I would make with all this is that first off, when you get the higher level relationships, the polarity is both very much there and not there. And what I mean by that is on a lower level polarity, you have a woman is only feminine and a man is only masculine. But there's like a one dimensionality to it. Okay. And so they compensate for each other, but particularly now, as there's so much pressure for them to move above that, those relationships don't really last very much. They destabilize pretty quickly in the modern era because usually one party is going to transcend beyond it. Okay. And once they transcend beyond it, once the woman gets a little bit in touch with their masculine, you know, independent woman, or the man gets in you know, contact with his feminine, you know, gets into his emotions, then the relationship begins to deteriorate unless they both kind of move together through that. And frankly, I think that stage of moving together through it was much more a product of the boomers. That's the boomer generation trajectory, that they started off in that and then they moved beyond it. Whereas our kind of current generation, it's very hard to even form those kind of relationships anymore in the West. It's just actually, I think it's even beyond the West. I think at this point, 10 years ago, it was maybe just the West, but at this point, it's all across the world. that those relationships are just collapsing really quickly. So what happens is that on a higher level, okay, you go through that middle stage where you get exposure to your shadow, your anima, animus, you get, or your masculine, feminine, and you go to the higher levels of integration. And when you get to there, you go back if you're a woman to your feminine, and you go back to your masculine if you're a man, but you have now a more rounded experience. So you play these two roles of masculine and feminine in your relationship, but the difference is that they're not so black and white with it. And what will happen is that she will be able to, in moments, hold space for you as maybe a man would. And um, how does this work? How do I explain this properly? Because I don't even like the way that that came across, but it's true. I mean, you can have tons of emotional conversations. You can talk about things because your emotions are so grounded, right? When you share something, you don't lose yourself. If there's not this sort of, and I've seen this in spirituality communities. I don't want to make fun of these guys, but there's so much weakness when they share their emotions. There's so much weakness. There's so much like just um so much pain. Frankly, I mean, I do feel bad for them, but they're not grounded in their masculine at all. They're only depolarized. Whereas a guy up at this level, he'll be able to share how he feels and share his pain. Not he doesn't share it all the time, but he'll be able to share it, and she'll be able to hold space for that. Okay, and vice versa, right? That that when he'll encourage her maybe to be able to go on her edge a bit and to push herself into things that are going to be a challenge for her, rather than trying to say, I'm going to take all this on myself. Okay, so yeah, exactly. Owning emotion versus dumping. Because when you dump, you make the other person own it for you. But when you own it, you're simply expressing it. And frankly, I mean, you allow it to come through you. Like I cry a lot. I cry when I see movies. I cry when I see stupid shit. I don't care. I mean, I don't give a fuck. Like my wife and I both laugh when I do it. It doesn't matter to me at all. And if a woman had an issue with that, like I don't cry. You want to know the last time I cried? You know why I cried? I cried I cried for you guys. I cried for everybody who's been kind of on this bigger journey, right? And all the pain that we've had to go through. I cried for other people and the pain that I felt that other people have been going through to try to like carry truth through all these things. I cried from that. I had so much love for all of you guys. I cried from that. And but I don't. It doesn't break me. Nothing breaks me. It's just so yeah. You let the emotions move through you, and I think that's a level of mastery. Yeah, brother, it is so much pain. It's so much fucking pain. It's so much fucking pain. So when we talk about all this stuff with relationships, when we talk about the stuff with relationships, and we talk about what's the ideal level of polarity? Well, what is the level within your relationship? What's the balance within your relationship? Right? It's having heart, Bob. That's exactly right. What's the level in your relationship? I think that when I see people on Twitter talking about, well, I need to have this much masculine or this much feminine in the dynamic, she needs to act this way. You are not being true to yourself. And that's a stage in the process where you're learning from other people. Okay, you understand that the dynamics you've been told were wrong and fucked up. And then now you're looking at other people who are telling you a more accurate thing, but they're telling it to you intellectually. And you're not saying, okay, cool, I like that. What about me? What about I want? How do I feel? What kind of relationship do I want to have? This is the advanced stuff. Is taking the macro and having and seeing what applies to you. Hey, I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for the kind words. What applies to you? Do you guys think for a second, I'm good with women, but do you think for a second that my game revolves around being some sort of like macho guy? No, it doesn't at all. Because that wouldn't be true to myself. That'd be incongruent. And people understand that on a lower level. They understand, okay, there's different styles, but the reality is that those styles, you go through these different subsections, and it's like, this is me. This is me. And all I care about on my journey is trying to peel back more layers of me, and then having someone who's going to accept me. Not because I need them to accept me, but because I don't want to compromise on me. I don't need anybody to tell me about masculinity at this point. Okay, I think you guys know I put my money where my mouth is with these things. So I have my own version of it, maybe you could say. On the lower level, they talk about, versions of masculinity, right? But that's a hijacking. It's a hijacking. They'll say, oh, well, this is the real masculine. And then they'll just give you some fucking weak bullshit. So they hijack people who are trying to actually individualize their soul's relationship with masculine energy. So they hijack that natural trajectory that we're going through, and then they pull it back to some propaganda bullshit to try to make guys weak. You guys understanding this? Understanding the range of this stuff and how it goes? It's hijackings. And the hijackings have two purposes, because one, they pull people down, but two, they make it very difficult to talk about these things. Because look at how precise I have to be. Look at how much I have to give. If I make an offhand word, if I say this on Twitter, and I'm not allowed to elaborate like this, someone's going to say, they don't do it as much anymore. But for like the last 4 years, it's been blue pill, purple pill. This is what a feminist would say. There's not a, yeah, this is where the men don't go to therapy, right? Well, first off, let's break that one down, Sean, right? First off, why don't men go to therapy? Well, mostly they don't go to therapy because most therapy is bullshit. Sorry, most of it's bullshit. You guys want a good therapist? I'm going to give you guys right now the only therapist. I'm not saying he's the only one out there. There's plenty of good ones, right? I don't want to say plenty of good ones, but Robert Glover, right? Shanti Smith, they're great guys. But Mark Darian's in our corner. He's accessible. He's affordable. Mark Darian's a great therapist for men. He's a really great therapist for men. Okay, he understands the stuff. He cuts through the shit. It's not like a lifetime commitment. It's a couple of sessions, and he does the work. I work with Mark before, and he made a huge impact in my life, and I appreciate him for that. So he's the only one I recommend. Okay, but it's like men don't go to therapy. Well, what is I understand. Look, I want to tell you guys something about coaching. Okay, and therapy is really, there's a lot of similarities. I think therapy is more focused on the past. I think coaching is more focused on the future. I think that there's a vibrational component to it, because therapy is more focused on the past, because therapists tend to work with people who are more in fear. So I do give them that, is that therapists in many ways are dealing with, psychologists, right? Clinical psychologists, right? But there are different tiers. I mean, there's therapists that have very minimal, and then you have more higher level psychologists, like maybe Jordan Peterson, who I would certainly not categorize with this stuff. But you have within this range, I have to be fair to them, that they really deal with triage, a lot of them. I mean, they're dealing with people from broken families, low income, really awful, awful situations, a lot of times sexual abuse. And I've worked with people in all those things too, but those are people who have already made a lot of steps in their life to get out of that. So they're dealing with residual elements of it. Whereas people who, very often they're paid by the state, the psychologists are paid by the state to provide triage, basically. How do I stop this person from killing themselves or harming others? Or how do I just make the minimal impact? And they also take on much heavier burdens as a result, because the people are not ready to shift. So I have a lot of sympathy. I don't want to be too denigrating with it. but they do work with fundamentally low vibrational people, and that's a product of the fact that they work with them mostly forever, and the improvements are mixed, to say the least. They're mixed. But this whole thing about men don't go to therapy, what it basically is that it's just another sort of feminized trope about how guys need to go see a therapist so they can talk about their feelings, and they can, emasculate themselves in a certain sense. Look, I think it's important to talk about your feelings. It's also important to become stronger, right? It's also important to become stronger because, also energy moves differently for some people, and men tend to move energy in the gym. They move energy through moving weights. I think, I think people need feminine healing is sort of more talk therapy. Masculine healing is more do something, challenge yourself. And I think that in the development of a man, depending on your stage, you need both. But a lot of guys at the lower stage, I think it's much more beneficial for most guys to hit the gym or to hit the weights or something like that. The gym has saved a lot of guys' lives because it's given them a way to move their energy, to move their anger. Now, I think that there's a cap on that, and eventually, as part of your growth process, you do need to, emotionally release and address things. And you see this with guys who, a lot of guys spent years in the gym, and they felt it saved their life, but they still felt like they needed to, that they weren't happy. And so then they do explore some of these emotion stuff, and then they do much better as a result of all that stuff, right? They get to the next level. They get to more of an integrated state. But to tell guys who don't have any masculinity that you need to go first and just talk about things. I'm a very empathetic person, and when I work with guys, I really meet them where they're at. I try not to be harsh or mean, but sometimes really the answer is get over it. Like sometimes you need to tell a guy stop being a pussy. Now you don't have to necessarily say it in a mean way. You can say it with love, but sometimes it's like, look, man, you know what you have to do. You do it or you don't do it. That's what it comes down to. You do it or you do not do it. That's it. Nothing else to talk through here. Well, that's the thing, Sean. Girls go to therapy and they accomplish nothing. Girls go to therapy and they accomplish nothing. I think that's true for a lot of girls because a lot of girls. I mean, I think for women, it's a good first step if they don't have somebody who they feel like cares about them. But then their next step needs to be to do something to take action, right? So you understand this. This is the trajectory. Masculine goes to masculine. Feminine goes to masculine to feminine. And so for a girl, going to therapy initially maybe is a good thing, but then they have to go and start being brave and start taking action in the world. And then they can go back to the feminine and be able to share their emotions because now they feel like stronger individuals. Whereas a man needs to go and, okay, you feel like shit, we'll go do something. Okay, now you're more stabilized. So now go explore the roots of those problems and the emotions, and now go back to being a more integrated man. And you see how it goes in both directions. Um, I love Riv but like look. I mean, obviously you can take a picture at the wrong moment for somebody. Like I could show you tons of pictures where my lines are really great, and I could show you a couple where they're not, right? Because of what was going on, what was the context of the dynamic, what was I doing? Was I making a joke? What was going on? You can always take these things out of context. All right, so what do I think about the energy of Twitter right now, and what does it mean for the future? I mean, it's a good question. What's the energy of Twitter right now? I mean, Twitter is okay. I still think there's a lot of the staleness. I'll say this about Twitter. Okay, here's what's different in Twitter, and here's what's really relevant. This is actually very relevant. Okay, I'm gonna tie some some dating advice into this one too. It's time, by the way. Okay, we're good. Okay, so the energy of Twitter is, I think that the manosphere, and I think that the community that initially existed has fragmented. And I think it's a good thing. For instance, the whole sort of hardcore red pill part of the community, maybe it's just my Twitter experience, but I don't really see much of them anymore. I think that they're much more quarantined off. I don't think that they're tiny, but I don't think that they're as big. I think their growth is capped out. 2018 and even 2019, you still saw those people would be, there was still connection between the two groups. I don't really see it anymore. And when I can tell you about my sort of experience of the manosphere now, is that it's actually less of the manosphere. The manosphere was generally about 9-1 man to female. You always had the 1%, the 10% or so of women who were either dating guys in that community already, or were lurkers, or had some kind of fun irony posts, and you know misfit girls. Let's say, put it that way, right? Misfit girls to go with some of these misfit guys, and you see that with any sort of misfit group, right? There's a bunch of guys and there's a handful of girls, and they're the misfits, right? And the girls kind of always do that unconsciously because, well, you get a bigger pool of guys who maybe will pay some attention to them. But I have to make this other point as well, and I'm maybe not being very charitable. I think sometimes what they do is they see this is an interesting group compared to the other guys, and the reality is that the manosphere is massively growing with women. I would say right now we're probably looking at 2-1 male to female ratio. Certainly, if we're talking about influential accounts, we're talking 2-1 male to female ratio. Now, you could say some things. You could be kind of mean, and you could say, "Well, the women are only getting it because they're women." A halfway attractive girl who talks about things guys want to hear is going to get more likes, and that's true. Yeah, that's true. Of course, for being honest, that's true. But what else is true is that women go where the energy is. Women go where the energy is. That's what they do. And the reality is that the regime, the system, doesn't have energy. The guys, the celebrities, all your favorite influential people, energy is not really there anymore. It feels hollow, and a lot of women are coming to the conclusion that, hey, you know what? Actually, male and female dynamics are fucked up. They are fucked up, and maybe we couldn't really get along. Maybe we really couldn't stomach some of the really bitter, negative red pill stuff, right? Maybe we couldn't stomach that, but this sort of new manosphere, which takes that information and channels it towards a productive level, fuck yes, we like this. We like these guys. These are the guys we've been waiting for. Where are these guys? We want to help these guys make this system. And so you're seeing that. There are so many women who are coming into the corner because of that stuff. Because they're either married to guys like that and they feel the need to share, but a lot of the women are younger and they're commenting on their own experience. And this is the whole thing, the divide. There is no real divide. There's no real divide between races. There's no real divide between men and women. It's all illusory. It's all psyops. And it's great that you're seeing lots of women who are waking up to this, and they're feeling the vision and the purpose of the men here compared to the sort of just fucking losers. I mean, it's fucking loser energy. Let's be honest here. Like, what are we getting from mainstream men? What do they have to offer anybody? I mean, if you're a woman, what about, you know, people talked about it like, nothing against bacon. I know some of you guys love bacon. I like bacon too. But this whole, like, beer and boobies and bacon kind of stuff. I mean, look, 10 years ago, when that first stuff was first coming in, people could still laugh about it, but and it could be funny. And if you're the funny guy, right? Same thing. Like if you're funny, you can attract girls. But if you're at your core a wimp, they might get attracted to you at first because you can make them laugh, but then eventually it becomes really disgusting for them to be around you. And the same thing is true socially. Is that it was all well and good when men were kind of like, haha, I'm not really a man, haha, and the girls were kind of laughing about that, and they continue to sleep with them and they continue to date them, but little by little, they became more and more disgusted with what they were dealing with. So, what do these guys have to offer? Right? I've wondered that. I've seen some of these pairings, I've seen some of these couples, and I've wondered, what's really here? What's really here that's worth that a woman would want to be drawn towards? What's I think that frankly, what mostly keeps women attached to it is just the ideological programming that they've been given, which is actually why they're mostly alone because their ideological programming maybe won't let them leave that little quarantine zone, that little area, but they can't be attracted to the men there either. So they're in this own limbo, and the ones who snap out of it pretty quickly find relationship success. And I have to be honest here, their age doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously, if you're they're much older, then it could make a difference. But I think a lot of women in their 30s who wake up to this stuff, and I think you're seeing it because they're getting maybe more pressure. They're 30s, 40s, they're moving to our area pretty quickly. There's plenty of girls in their 20s too, but I'm making the point just because when those girls do that, maybe they're 35. When they do that, if they've kept themselves in shape, I've seen a lot of them get hitched up real quick, real quick. So, in terms of strategy, let me check these questions. I would recommend Mark Darien for help with self sabotage. I would recommend him for that. Now he's really great. Do I think the red pill is a bad thing? I think it's a phase. I think it's a phase. I mean, what is the red pill though? Let's be honest here. What is the red pill? Like, someone define that for me, and not from Rolo, right? This is ridiculous. For a lot of people, the red pill is that women are hypergamous. It's like this is the most fucking obvious. Like, okay, I want to be fair. Maybe it wasn't obvious. Okay, maybe it wasn't obvious. Maybe you didn't know that. Okay, now you know it, and that's it. You've completed the course. It's not that complicated. It's not complicated. You don't need to spend a long time thinking about it. Not complicated. Women are hypergamous. It's the female shadow. Some women exercise their hypergamy more than others based on their level of vibration and their cultural controls. If their vibration's low, then the cultural controls make a bigger impact on whether they exercise their hypergamy because they're more afraid of the social controls than they're afraid of cheating or whatever or branch swinging. You take away the social controls and you have a low vibration woman, you have a slut. That's what you have. Okay? That happens. But if you have a higher vibration woman, then she's not going to be as controlled by it. Just like a high vibration man isn't going to be as controlled. If you're a low vibration guy, then you are going to have no interest in your woman, even if she's taking good care of herself, because you only will fuck a girl who's under 25, right? That's my perspective. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with an older guy having sex with a legal age woman, but I'm just saying that the fixed sort of fixation on this stuff. I mean, it's literally their shadow. They've done no real work, so I don't think it's a bad thing. But it's a stage you have to go through. I've said this before. I wrote a whole post on it, but I think it's probably saved a lot of people's lives because it's moved them up from a position of helplessness to a position of anger, which is an improvement, right? It's an improvement. I think if you're from a minority, I think it's actually important if you've been just sort of in this servile helplessness. I think it's actually important and healthy for you to go through a stage of anger at the majority. But then you shouldn't stay there. You should move through that. Then you kind of break out of that and you understand bigger context and you understand the sort of connected humanity, right? You understand your own autonomy, you have your own respect for other people. But going through an anger stage is important. A lot of guys that I work with, I need to help them to get, they'll if a girl doesn't um, move forward with them, they'll get really upset, they'll get really bummed out, they'll get really depressed. And there's a part of the practice very often where it's like, hey, she's a dumb bitch. I'm not saying she actually is a dumb bitch, right? But in the context of his dynamic, fuck her. Why the fuck are you getting upset about someone like that? So much beneath you, right? You kind of help them to get a little bit angry and to understand their own value relative to the girl. The biggest thing that changed my game is when I started to look at girls from a perspective of qualifying them constantly. It's like, is she good enough for me? Is she good enough for me? Is she good enough for me? Now, it's not, I wouldn't be doing it like that. But as part of the process of, am I good enough for her? Am I good enough for her? I had to go to, is she good enough for me? Is she good enough for me? And then I could get to, well, we're different people and we have different objectives. And there's nothing wrong with her. She's on her journey. She likes a different kind of guy. It's not about that. But I had to go through the point of like, fuck that dumb bitch. She doesn't want to fuck me. Fuck her. Right? I had to go through that. And I think you have to go through that. You have to go through that as a guy. But I would like it to be as brief as possible because if you stay there too long, then you actually start to hate women. It becomes toxic, right? It becomes a toxic situation. Feminism, very similar. Women discovering their power. Then it became toxic. Became their point of existence was blaming men. That's not empowering. Never empowering to blame somebody else. So you go from maybe saying, I've been kept down a little bit, right? And he doesn't have to tell me what to do. For a lot of women, that's a huge. My grandmother was in an abusive relationship, like physically abusive relationship. It was very, very powerful for her to come to the conclusion that she didn't have to do what he told her to do, that she could leave. That's very powerful. We can't take that away from women. But if the woman then stays stuck there, that no man can ever tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah. And look, it's like telling me what to do. I want to be correct with the phrasing here, but this whole point that to stay constantly in adversity to the other person, that's when we get stuck. And so then we move one step up the ladder, but we don't climb the ladder. We just move one step up. And a lot of the red pill guys, I think the best analogy I've heard is that they were on a ship that got torpedoed and they were thrown a life raft. And so they stay on the life raft. But then when somebody says, hey, I'll take you to land, or they see the land over there, they won't go swim towards the land. They just decide to stay on that life raft because, well, if I don't have this life raft, I drown. It's like, well, you're alive, but you're barely alive. What is your life? That's how I would make the analogy. Healthy hypergamy is a good thing. Yeah, I would say that. I mean, it's just a natural thing, right? It's a natural thing. But yeah, I think hypergamy, it just depends on the basis of the psyche behind it. If a girl is really fucked up, right? If she's really fucked up, then she's going to be looking for anything better because she's superficial and she's, it's low vibration stuff. But hypergamy in general, yeah, I mean, it's part of the biological mechanism of people, right? That the weakest men are weeded out and the strongest men benefit the most. But I think if people can take that to an extreme, I mean, most guys are going to get women. Most guys are going to get women. So But hypergamy does help men become better. And so I think that probably the biggest way that a man can grow. What are the ways a man can grow, right? How does a man grow? Let's bring it full circle before we close this up, right? A man grows by being on his edge. A man grows by facing the void, by facing death. Okay? And that death can be in physical form. A man will grow from that. Okay? A man will also grow from death in the experience of a woman. And I think in the modern context, that's the most common way that guys will grow is through their relationships with women. You know, borderline girls, borderline personality disorder girls, or girls adjacent to that, every guy who's been with one says the same thing. They're the best teachers. It's completely correct. The more crazy a girl is, the more she tests the guy. And the more guys test it, the more he grows from the experience. He could grow from the experience. It's an offering. Those girls are very much gifts. They're very much gifts. You know, you learn so much from them. You learn so much from them. And you know, you can do it with a business too, right? So I would say that a business, war, and love are the three ways that a man can most easily test himself. Nature too, I guess you could say, the wilderness, right? Those three or four. But it's all these things a man has to be on his edge. And when he does that, he feels his soul rises to the occasion. His soul buffers him in the journey, but he comes back a different man from it. Come back differently. And all the sort of mental masturbation of people who are like, I read this, you know, what do you think of this study? The study, fuck you. Fuck you. It doesn't fucking matter. It's nothing. You have no idea. You have no idea of the real truth. All that stuff, it's fine. It's good to be a scholar, but seriously, fuck off if you think that it's a replacement for real world experience. I'm gonna answer your question, Aussie day game, and then I'm gonna sign off here. My thoughts on people who spam approach in day game. Some beginner day gamers seem to think there's no point of conversing because she needs to like your looks. Well, the latter is a total cope. It's a total way to just bail out of trying to improve yourself. However, um, you know, I think that there's probably some benefit to spamming approaches early on. A lot of people in the day game community will say that you need to do at least 100 approaches or you're not even considered a day gamer, right? You got to just get 100 approaches out of the way. And there's benefit to doing that stuff. There's benefit, you know, one of my favorite tactics when I was going out would be to throw words. I learned that from Nick Sparks. You just, you know, make comments to girls as you go by. Hey, I really like your, you know, really like your dress. Oh, what are you drinking? That looks good. Just throwing words, not trying to actually pursue the conversation, but just to get energy moving. When you're stuck in your headspace, all of your energy is like right here. And so by moving it down here to your mouth, where you start to say things, you move your energy further down. And so there's benefit to then, okay, now you're physically going up to a girl and you're physically saying something. Energy is moved out of your head and it's moved down to your body. And that's a benefit of doing it. In terms of spam approaches, is there any benefit to doing that if you're not stuck in your headspace? No, there's not. Because if you're actually connected to your heart center and you try to do spam approaches, you're going to feel like you're back in your headspace because you're going to have to tell yourself, well, I got to just say things to her. I got to follow the script. That's bullshit. So when you're actually dropped into your body, there's no reason to spam approach anymore because then you can actually feel her. You can feel what your sex drive wants. You can feel what your heart wants. You don't need to do that kind of crap to move yourself out of there. So anyway, guys, it was fun. We'll do another one soon. Probably in New York though. So I'll see you guys. Take care.